welcome once again. This one is lesson number 2 now on the miracle of America. And this one is called The Founder's Search for the Ideal Society. We're just asking ourselves, where did the founders get all those good ideas from anyway that put everything together in such a remarkable formula? Now, if you studied nuclear science, or if you were studying to become a doctor, or any of the advanced areas of learning, you'd appreciate how important it is to find the people that have the great ideas. And that's what they were searching for. And I don't think that since the days of the Greeks probably, we had any group of men sit down as earnestly as the founding fathers did to come up with the ingredients for the best possible society. And we find from their writings they did a tremendous amount of study in political theory, political history, as well as theory. Your first blank is history, political history. What was the experience of the human race? And then they did a lot of work on political philosophy as men sat down in ancient times and tried to figure out the best wisdom, which is what philosophy means. What did they come up with? So they studied everybody's good ideas in the area of philosophy. And now they also wanted to know the best possibility of sound economics, and that's your next blank. Sound economics. Then they put it all together in terms of their own experience, and that's your next blank. Their own experience, because no matter what people said theoretically, it's got to be sound. And I just want to read from the Federalist Papers. Will you write that down? Federalist Papers, number 14, where Madison said the following. Is it not the glory of the people of America that whilst they have paid a decent regard to the opinions of former times and other nations, they have not suffered a blind veneration for antiquity, for custom, or for names to overrule the suggestions of their own good sense, the knowledge of their own situation, and the lessons of their own experience. To this manly spirit posterity will be indebted for the possession, and the world for the example of the numerous innovations displayed on the American theater in favor of private rights and public happiness. And then he closes with this sentence. Happily for America, happily we trust for the whole human race, they pursued a new and more noble course. They accomplished a revolution which has no parallel in the annals of human society. They reared the fabrics of government which have no model on the face of the globe. They formed the design of a great confederacy which it is incumbent on their successors to improve and perpetuate. And that's us. And that's our task, to make sure that it gets improved, resurrected, revived, and perpetuated. That's why we're here. All right? Now let's go into something that the Founding Fathers discovered, which was extremely important, and that was the fact that if you do all of this work, you will find that there are really only 2 systems of government and law, just 2. And we've given them each a name, a simple name that will define them better than the technical names. The first one is ruler's law, meaning all power in the ruler. And the second is people's law, all power in the people. All right, now ruler's law was the thing that had prevailed all over Europe. It was all over the continent. It is spread up and down the continent from one end to the other. And it was there called Roman civil law. Roman civil law is your blank under 1. But we have given it a better name, ruler's law, which really describes what it is. Now, people's law had only survived in one country, and that was England. It was usually called Anglo-Saxon or English common law, but we have described it as people's law because it meant all power in the people. Now, I want to go through the principal characteristics of ruler's law because some of it's beginning to appear in our own culture and society, and the founders said when ruler's law begins to appear, you will know you're on the wrong track. All right, number 1. Authority is taken over the people, usually by force or conquest, and that's your blank, force or conquest. Therefore, all sovereign authority is in the ruler, and that's your second one, ruler. Now, the people are not equal. The people are not equal at all. They're divided into classes. That's number 3. And the king treats them as his subjects, you know. His subjects. All right, number 4. The entire country is looked upon as the property of the king. You shall not poach in Sherwood Forest. You remember that from days of Robin Hood? All right, it is the king's realm, you know. All right, and government is from the top down always, top down. Not from the people's will upward, it's the will of His Majesty. And number 6, the people do not have any inalienable rights. The king giveth and the king taketh away. So rights is number 6. Government then is not by law, but by the whims of men. Therefore, you don't really know from day to day where you're going to stand in the situation. The whims of men are what you have to anticipate and politicalize and negotiate and get along with. You can't anticipate your rights because it's the whims of men will control, not the law. Number 8, the ruler has the prerogative of not only issuing the law, he interprets the law, and his officers enforce the law. And your blank is interprets. Now, Madison said those are the ingredients for tyranny. When you get all of those forces working together, you have tyranny. And number 9, under ruler's law, problems are always solved, if you'll notice, with more laws, more bureaus, more regulations, and always more taxes. And that's your blank. They never talk about freedom being an option. Freedom is never looked upon as a viable solution to anything. And that's your blank for number 10, freedom. You see, we've been getting a little of that lately. I keep waiting for the president to say, we're going to solve our energy crisis by turning the people loose. You'd be amazed what would happen. Freedom. No, I keep hearing about $10 billion worth of regulation and bureaucracy. $10 billion. It regulated us into the worst energy crisis we've had in our whole history. Freedom, freedom. Just remember, that's what solves problems. All right, number 11. The long history of ruler's law is one of blood and terror, both anciently and in modern times. Under it, the people are stratified into an aristocracy of the ruler's retinue, while the lot of the common people is one of perpetual poverty, excessive taxation, stringent regulations, and perpetual misery. And that's your blank, misery. All right, now, the founders said there's a better way. There really is a better way. And that's to keep everything under the control of the people, and that's called people's law. People's law. And they said the most important thing there, number 1, is to get the people involved. And people is your blank. There is no right to rule in a particular family. There is no divine right of any particular person to rule. By God's own allowance, Locke said, it's in the people. And number 2, that means that all legal power to govern is in the people. That's not only an inalienable right to govern ourselves, but it's our legal right. And number 3, by mutual consent, we've all entered into covenant with one another to live in a society where we will support and help one another. We did that by mutual consent. And that not only is a great blessing, it also carries some responsibilities. And number 4, all laws and the selection of our leaders should be done by the consent of the majority. When we elect our Congress, we elect our president, it should be by the consent of the majority. But guess what? At an election, a national election, we seldom can get more than half the people to vote, which means that our senators and congressmen are being elected by minorities. Now that's by neglect. Let's not overlook that. And we got to do something about that and get more people involved. Number 5, because the leaders of government are elected by the people, hopefully the majority, they become the servants of the people. The servants. They are not the rulers. And I've served in the federal government, in state and local government, and I always tried to remind those that were associated with me that when a person calls all frustrated on the phone, remember, we're their servants. Be patient with them. All right, number 6. The thrust of government is from the people upward, not from the government down. It'd be so easy to run a city if you'll just say, folks, what do you want? Oh, not much lately. Everything's going pretty good. But what's been happening in our country? Vast programs are coming in from the top to be imposed down. You just can't possibly be happy without this latest program for the schools or for your city, and vast beautification programs. Yeah, who thought it up? Ooh, somebody back in Washington or New York or Chicago. That's become part of our lifestyle now, to have somebody else from the outside coming in, posing something down on us. Now, if you let the people's wants are really relatively simple, and that's what we should be waiting on. What do the people really want? All right, number 7. Any powers granted to an officer of government is limited. There are only certain things he can do. We don't just say, we're going to just turn it all over to you, sir, and we hope you'll be kind. We don't do that. All right, number 8. Basic rights of the people are considered an endowment of the Creator, and each human being has these inalienable rights. Now, what makes it inalienable? Have you ever thought of that? By the way, down south, it's unalienable. You see, at Williams and Mary's College in Virginia, it's unalienable. Harvard, it's inalienable. Both identical, but there was that little difference in the days of the founders. Now, it becomes inalienable if it's endowed by God. That means that that right in the person cannot be destroyed or damaged without violating God's law, which means it brings a person subject to God's judgment. You follow that? That's what makes it inalienable. My law students sometimes say, now, what do you mean it's inalienable? People lose those basic rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and property. Right. But whoever took it away from them will one day face God's judgment. Those are inalienable rights. All right, number 9. The land is considered the heritage of the people, not the government. These vast resources are to be explored and developed. They're not to be blocked off in wilderness areas and so forth, not to be developed. This whole earth was prepared for human habitation and for human enjoyment. And it's abundant and full. People keep saying, we're running out of things, we're running out of things. This whole thing has been pre-programmed. We're not going to run out of things. Keep taking advantage of the resources that have been very carefully stored and prepared by a God who told Isaiah that it was done for the welfare of humanity. It was done by a design that will be carried out according to a timetable that's already been pre-planned. And so anybody that tries to stop everything, he's stopping human progress and the plans of the Creator. All right, now, the next one is the fact that our whole area, territory, by the design of the founders, was divided into small manageable units. And in 1785, they divided everything up into homesteads, rather I should say, into townships, 6 miles square. 1775, they said, we want an orderly country. And very often I'll go out and I fly over the Midwest and I said, all checkerboard, all nicely laid out. Only country in the world that was surveyed so carefully. And number 11, all of the people are expected to participate in the political process. And number 12, under people's law, the purpose of government is to provide equal protection of rights, never equal distribution of things. And I'm going to talk about that a little later when we get to the welfare clause, because our government has become deeply involved in a violation of that principle of people's law. And it'll take you into the area of ruler's law if you violate it. All right, Roman numeral 2. Now, how do you measure government? How can you tell when you've got a good government or when you've got the wrong government, etc.? Now, that brings us to the political spectrum. Now, the founders had a completely different approach to it than the one that I was taught when I was taking political science in school. See, they would tell me that over here at the extreme right, you had fascism. Over here at the extreme left, communism. Well, now the founders said that doesn't make sense, because you measure government like you measure anything else. You start over here where you don't have any, where there's no government, and anarchy exists. And then you come right over across the scale till you get too much government. All right, so that's, we have two extremes, in other words. And it's not fascism versus communism, as we'll demonstrate in a little while. It's actually no government and too much government. Doesn't that make more sense? All right, now, you'd be surprised where that line came from of fascism versus communism. But it's a very confusing concept, and it's totally erroneous, the founders would have said. All right, capital A is extremes, and capital B, of course, represents no law over here to the right, and then over here at the other extreme, too much government. Now, somewhere in between, about where I'm standing, you see right above my head, it says people's law, people's law. All right, now that's where we want to be. But it's very difficult to get there on the spectrum, as the founders discovered. They declared their independence, and it took them 11 more years to try and find that spot, and they'll talk about that in a few minutes. All right? Now, somewhere in between, the founders felt they would find this golden mean. It's the balanced center, where you have enough government, but not enough to abuse the people, and that's your blank. D is abuse. Now, that's what the convention was all about, to try and find that balanced center. That's your next blank, that balanced center, where they could apply the principles of people's law. All right, Roman numeral 3. Now, there were two ancient peoples. You see, you'd want to know from your political history, wouldn't you, who was able to ever put in people's law and keep it? Well, I want to tell you it's slippery. It isn't easy to keep. And the whole history of the human race has been one of blood and terror under rulers' law, but occasionally there were people for a creditable period of time who put it into operation. Here they are. Ancient Israelites did it. The ancient Israelites did it. And the Anglo-Saxons did it. And the founding fathers were very careful students of both. You got a little view of some of the old Anglo-Saxon civilization. They're very interesting to study because their institutes are identical with those of ancient Israel. Isn't that interesting? Now, the Anglo-Saxons, they had no basic, their religion wasn't anything like ancient Israel, but their institutes of freedom were. How do we account for that? Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute. Now, I just want to show you the history of ancient Israel, if I may. The Israelites, this is capital A, came up out of Egypt around 1450 BC. Some of your books say 1250, but our latest chronology says that they came up around 1250 BC. Now, notice here, they came from the eastern Nile, right along here, you see, and they crossed over. The Red Sea actually used to come up a little higher, just a little higher, and then they came down into over here to the Horeb Range, which is right in here, and then there was a special mountain called Mount Sinai, which means the mountain of the bush, and that's where Moses received these instructions, which turned out to be, the founders said, exactly what we want to copy. Isn't that interesting? All right, now we're going to talk about that for a moment. The things that they picked up during this period was they were a commonwealth of freemen. Their instructions were to remain free. The instructions said, proclaim liberty throughout all the land and to all the inhabitants thereof. They've got to be freemen. All right, now where is that found? That's in the Bible. I've got your citation, Leviticus 25 and 10. Where is it found in Americana? On our Liberty Bell. It's right along the top of the Liberty Bell. It's written right up there along the top. Right, that whole area there along the top is this particular citation. All right? Now, every once in a while, these people would fall into the temptation of making slaves, etc. And you'll find Jeremiah really going after the people about 600 BC when he says, ye have not hearkened unto me in proclaiming liberty. Everyone to his brother and every man to his neighbor. Behold, I proclaim liberty for you, saith the Lord. Isn't that interesting? Jeremiah 34 and 17. All right? Now, they received their famous Mosaic Code, and I've studied it now extensively, written several books on it, as a matter of fact, and because my profession is law, and that's what the Mosaic Code is, a good law for an ideal society. So I want to get better acquainted with it like the founders did. All right, first of all, you've all heard about the Ten Commandments, which the founders wanted taught to all our children. And let's go through them very briefly. You probably have them all memorized anyway, but let me just go through them briefly. First of all, to recognize the existence and the dignity and power and majesty of the Creator. The Creator. And the founders talked about that continuously, the importance of recognizing we're part of an orderly world of cause and effect and a Creator who designed it. And then secondly, a warning not to attribute these wonderful creative processes to false gods or false forces, spontaneous generation, just an inborn teleological thing that just kind of made all these nice things. No, God said it was by very careful design. And then C, do not take the name of God in vain. When you take covenants and so forth, fulfill your obligations. When you swear to tell the truth, fulfill that obligation before God. And children should honor their parents, that they themselves might be honored in their time and live long and happily upon the earth. And with 8 children and 30 grandchildren now, I have reached that age in life where that golden beauty of being honored by children and grandchildren is the greatest pleasure of my life. And then E, set aside every 7th day for rest, for study, and for service to both God and man. Sabbath day worship. And it says, thou shalt not kill, and he who sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, saith the Lord, in order to keep human life sacred. And the next one is, thou shalt not commit adultery. Honor the covenants that make a family relationship solid and firm and trustworthy. And thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not steal. And thou shalt not bear false witness or lie. And thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods, but go out and earn your own. How do you like that? 10th commandment is the gospel of work. Don't covet your neighbor's good and figure out how to cheat him out of his. Go out and earn your own. Well, all of the camps of Israel were ultimately organized into small, manageable units where each person had a voice and a vote. A voice and a vote. All right, now look at this mass of people that Moses brought up out of Egypt. How would you like that? How would you like to have to govern those? Well, Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, is described in the 18th chapter of Exodus of coming down to see how his son was doing. His son's 80 years old, and let's see how he's governing all these people. There were 600,000 troops, and with their wives and their children, we assume there were about 3 million. A lot of people anyway. And he watched Moses, and Moses said, any of you who have problems, line up, so to speak. He had a little table, I guess, and they queued up. Oh, you wouldn't believe how many people had problems. So Jethro watched Moses try to handle it. And Moses got a couple of men here and a couple of brothers. And, all right, what's your problem? Well, my brother stole my sheep. I didn't steal your sheep. Mother gave those sheep to me. No, she never did give those sheep to you. And they got Moses listening, both sides, trying to decide which way to go. And someone way back down the line says, hurry up. It was terrible. Moses didn't get any lunch. He worked all afternoon. He didn't get any supper. And toward the evening, this record says he just staggered back over to the tent. And Jethro, his father-in-law, was waiting and said, my son, what thou doest is not good. Thou shalt not bring peace to these people. Nobody's going to be satisfied with this. I want to tell you how to do it. And God will verify it. What you do is to divide the people up into units of 10 families. And we won't fill any blanks in here for a moment. I'll give it all to you in a second. And then you take 5 of those group and have them elect a leader of 50 families. You see, the 10 families elect a leader. Then you get 50 families, they elect a leader. Then you get 2 of those groups, that's 100 families, and they elect a leader. And then you get 10 of those groups, 10 of 100 families, and get them together, and you have 1,000 families. And you don't take anything to Moses except that which is extremely important, involves all the people and too difficult to be solved on the local level. And I said, if you do that, everybody will depart in peace to their tents. And in Deuteronomy chapter 1, Moses describes how wonderfully it worked. All right, now if you'll look at this little chart here, I've charted for you exactly how it was done. And if you'll go down to the bottom, you'll notice that the Israelite family was the foundation of the whole operation. And then in the first blank, put 10 families. See how they did it? 10 families. Now you gather 5 of those together, and that's 50 families. They have to elect a leader too. And the next one is 100 families. The next one is 1,000 families. And then they have a Congress. How do you like that? They had a Congress representing the whole group, which would be together in council. And then they had a Senate of 70 elders. And then they had Moses with Aaron, I guess you could call him vice president. In fact, at one time it looked like he had 2 vice presidents. But anyway, the whole idea is there. The founders studied that very carefully. It's all there, the structure of a well-ordered society. All right, now will you Look at number 4. There was a specific emphasis on strong local self-government. Self-government. All right? Problems were solved to the greatest possible extent on the level where they originated. The record says the hard cases they brought to Moses, but every small matter they judged themselves. Now let me give you an example of how that worked after they got everybody all divided up. Supposing I were elected the leader of 10 families. And a father comes to me and he said, I got a problem. My little boy George is smoking joints. You know, marijuana for those that you wouldn't know about joints. All right, marijuana. I said, well, where's he getting it? He said, I don't know, but you used to be his scoutmaster. Maybe he'll tell you. He won't tell me. And so I talked to little George, and George says finally, he's getting them from Albert. Uh-oh, Albert's not in my group. He's under another man. So I go over and I say to this other man, who's a judge of another 10 families, we got a problem. Well, he said, I don't have any problem. What's yours? I said, well, I got a boy, George, smoking joints. He said, well, that's what I say. You got a problem. No, I said, we have a problem because my boy's getting them from your Albert. My Albert? I don't believe it. I said, well, you're going to talk to him, aren't you, and investigate it? No, I wouldn't think of accusing the lad of such a dastardly thing. Now, I got a problem, haven't I? I'm not getting my problem solved. So what do? I have to go up to the next level. And that's the judge of 50 families. And the judge of 50 families asks my problem, and I say, we got some of our young people smoking marijuana. He says, that's very bad. We shouldn't have them doing that. It has a very bad effect on the genetic structure, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know whether they knew about that in those days, but anyway, he knows it's bad. And he says, let's stop it. And I said, well, it's coming from a boy that's in a group that's other than my own. Well, he said, go talk to the man. I said, I have, but he won't cooperate. He won't investigate. And the judge says, he what? Summon him. And so he summons him, and we get an investigation, and we get the thing worked out. Now, do you follow how they did that? Now, I want you to notice what's happening today. It's quite different. The tendency is to constantly go to Moses for every little problem we have. A local community has a problem with the sewage disposal. What's the first thing they think of? First thing they think of? Getting a grant from Washington. See, that's Moses. That's going to the lead all the time, going up to the top. The very thing that these people were told not to do. Well, that gives you an idea how important that principle is of solving our problem at the local level. And now, that brings us to the conclusion of the first half of lesson number 2.